after years of waiting and delays, the merge is finally here and seemingly has gone off without a hitch. Some would argue that this is the biggest technical event that's ever happened in the history of crypto. So the very fact that it didn't utterly fail is cause for celebration. And today, I'm not even going to list all the guests because today we went really big. We have a ton of people here. Now, if you looked at the thumbnail, you would probably think that I've compiled a boy band. Backstreet's back. All right. Because we've got like 7 or 8 of us, and the flyer really looks like we're going to get ready to sing. But we are not going to sing, but we are going to talk about the Ethereum merge, what that means for the future. And honestly, I have no idea what we'll end up talking about after that with this many people. It'll probably be exciting and keep me on my toes. You guys don't want to miss this. Let's go.
Let's go.
What is up, everybody? I'm Scott Melker, also known as the Wolf of All Streets. Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel and go ahead and gently caress the like button. You guys can actually do whatever you want to the like button. There's no judgment here. This is a judgment-free zone, so just do the like thing. Anyways, guys, as I mentioned, there's a lot of suspense coming into the merge, and much like I expected, it was kind of like Y2K, right? You went to bed and the merge was going to happen, and you woke up and apparently the merge had happened, and don't feel any different, right? I don't particularly feel merged at the moment, but I guess no news at the moment is pretty good news. So we're going to have rolling guests, as I said today. I'm going to bring on everybody that we have here already. I've got Anthony Iorio, Gabor Gurbacs, Matthew Sigel, and Jason Lau. Wow, that format is looking weird. Let's try that. Cool. How are you guys all doing? You don't have to respond. I know everybody is doing well. I was commenting, VanEck clearly has a vest-only policy in the office. If you can see from Matthew and Gabor, they're both dressed in vests, ready for the boy band. But Anthony, I actually want to start with you. You're obviously one of the co-founders of Ethereum, so this is a huge moment, I would imagine. When you guys started, it was obviously proof of work. At what point did the conversation switch to a potential move to proof of stake? And what was that process like, and how did we end up landing here in 2022?
So it was pretty much right at the beginning. I mean, it was always known that there was going to be that move to proof of stake down the road when it was ready. And that was done to ensure that proof of work miners knew that what was going to be coming up down the road, who knows when it was going to happen. And it's taken a lot longer than was expected, which tends to happen. But it was really right from the beginning. And the difficulty bomb, which was an explosion that was put into the code at a certain time, it would go off to make proof of work mining not possible, was always planned, and it's been delayed year after year, that bomb. But pretty much from day one, it was in the mix that would eventually turn over, and to get proof of work miners aware that that's what was coming.
That makes sense. And so I think that every platform, exchange, everybody has sort of had a different plan for how they were going to manage this. Jason, specifically at OKCoin, how have you guys been preparing? Well, how did you prepare, I should say, and how's that going?
I think over here, we're just glad that it went so smoothly. We had teams up all night, obviously. We had all these plans in case things didn't work out. And yeah, frankly, we're just all taking a collective breath and excited that this milestone actually happened. Like Anthony said, it's been years in the making, right? We've seen this come down the pipe, and we're just glad it happened.
And then obviously we have Gabor and Matthew here from VanEck. I'm sure you guys have been tracking this very, very closely. Either of you, I mean, give your thoughts onto what's happening now, and then I guess after that we're going to switch into what we think this means for the future.
Yeah, I'll go. I think we're pretty encouraged that there's been more ETH staked in the last 6 hours than there was in the prior, like 4 times more in the last 6 hours than the previous 24 hours. So if you look at it on a chart, right when the merge happened, like staking activity went parabolic. So that's an important thing that has to continue, right? Because the percentage of ETH staked is so low relative to other L1s. And so it's that commitment to locking the liquidity up that's going to hopefully diminish a lot of the sell pressure and make number go up. So, I think we're encouraged by the fundamentals. The price action you can see around other major developments in crypto, like Bitcoin halvings and stuff. It doesn't necessarily move the price right away. It's about building commitment, proving stability of the network, and then getting bigger players to commit by building apps, settling value on chain, and hopefully that's going to come through over the next few months.
Yeah, so Gabor, you guys obviously are talking to institutional investors all the time. Is the feeling that people were sort of waiting to see it successfully happen, and that's why we're seeing 4 times the amount of Ethereum staked and people sort of flooding in now that there's a bit of confidence that the world's not going to explode?
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking to institutions from 2015 about Ethereum's proof of stake conversion. So people are definitely ready for this, and we will see what happens. We'll see. I mean, a lot of hash power is sort of parked in ETC, and we'll see where the miners end up. And definitely exciting. A lot of people are focusing on just from a fundamentals perspective for fees decreasing on the network, which is good for participants, so you can actually use the chain at scale. There are some questions on the institutional side of what it means to change the security of the network from proof of work. I spent the last 9-10 years talking about proof of work and how that makes it different from other systems that are more centralized and not necessarily censorship resistant and needs energy to defend such systems. So this is going to be different with proof of stake, but so we'll see. Some of the institutional investors are excited about this because of climate impact, which has been a big part of conversation in the past few years. I'm not too enthusiastic about the climate conversation, but
I don't think anyone's enthusiastic about the nature of the climate conversation, and we can have a debate another time about whether it's valid or not, obviously. But I think to your point, a lot of institutions, whether it is valid or not, that's something that they have to speak to, at least to their investors, and it makes a lot of sense now that they can just sort of put that aside. But Anthony, I want to go back to why was the move to proof of stake basically baked into the original launch of Ethereum in the first place? I mean, it's pretty interesting. It's proof of work for 7 or 8 years, right? I know obviously it just wasn't ready, but was there a glaring issue with proof of work that you guys saw from the very beginning that made you want to move to proof of stake when it was available?
Yeah, I think back then there was awareness of deficiencies in proof of work, and there's deficiencies in proof of stake. There's deficiencies in pretty much anything. There's not going to be 100% that's going to be able to solve everything. So the idea that there was some foreseeing of a built-up issues with proof of work, centralization, potentials. The reason that things were all done through GPUs and not ASICs was the ability to get people in the hands of get these graphics cards in the hands of people. So there's a lot of thought on how do we balance all the things that are needed to create a decentralized system, which I think Ethereum has always been first and foremost is about decentralization. And that's something that I really respect from that project and gives me a lot of confidence that the first thing that is always going to come forward is decentralization. And I think other projects that have tried to do things by twisting the dials a bit and reducing some of that decentralization to get benefits elsewhere, over the years I've learned to kind of really respect the Ethereum process. And I left the project in 2015, so I'm not involved in Ethereum. But there was times 2015 and 2018 where I was thinking that there were going to be some other projects coming along that were really going to eat its dinner, and I've swayed back over the last couple of years in really that realization of that focus on decentralization and doing everything possible to ensure that is something that's led me back into the Ethereum camp much more and confidence much more in the project as a whole. So all the little things, including what is best for the consensus mechanism, what is best for mining that can decentralize as much as possible and get it away from the hands of collective larger entities. Now, proof of stake has those downsides as well. I mean, we've seen what happened with Lido, an entity that emerged in order to ensure that the exchanges don't become the powerhouses of everything to do with staking. And now Lido itself is a major player, and votes of DAOs to change it didn't work out. So I'm concerned mostly with DAO structures in the future as one of the biggest risks, I think, in the space, and the powers of larger entities that are going to be putting potentially profit motives ahead of the ethos and decentralization motives. That's where I think there's concern. So yes, back in the day, there was definitely awareness of what would be a system that would be the future and could limit some of the potential issues there was a lot of talk of energy conservation, and that was a factor as well back then in the thinking along the way. But it was a bunch of things where there was foresight with a team that could see in the future of where things are heading, and that's really what we did. Very good at seeing where the future was going. The people involved were Bitcoin people that saw where that was heading. We then started Ethereum based on deficiencies we saw with Bitcoin and in doing further advanced things, and all the formulas come together to build what Ethereum is today. And a lot of it was considerations such as that move to proof of stake right from the beginning. That's where it's heading, and giving people the warning that that's where the future would be.
Gabor, you mentioned before that people are looking forward to a reduction in fees, but to my understanding, that's not really in the cards, at least at the moment, right? I mean, I think there's been obviously a lot of. Yeah,
I didn't say that myself, but
no, I said no. Gabor said the institutional investors. I'm not putting the words in his mouth. Yeah, eventually, but I think that like one of the things that there's been a lot of, I think, just confusion about what the merge really means, right? A lot of people think it's going to become faster and cheaper. Not really going to happen right now, correct? Anyone can jump in. Jason, I see you now nodding your head.
You're completely correct. Yeah. There's no difference. You can wake up. You wake up today. You may not even have known the merge happened. It didn't matter for an end user or developer or something like that. It didn't matter.
It's a step-by-step process. It's a key part that's going to lead to those eventual wins down the road. There were a lot of things that needed to get done to prepare for it. I run a number of nodes. We had to make sure that we did things properly in order to do that for our clients and our customers. But yeah, most people aren't going to see anything. They're going to just see that they still have their Ether, and they're going to hopefully hold on to it and wait to see what comes out of this before making any decisions, like exporting their private keys in order to get the proof of work coins. So kind of wait and see what's going to happen over the next few days is what I think most people are doing. But yeah, a lot of people aren't going to see any changes.
Got it. Here's a question that's going to be a trap, and none of you are going to probably want to answer. Why are Bitcoiners so angry about the merge? Anyone?
I can answer that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anthony. You should go ahead. I'm curious about you.
I think first of all, generalizations like that don't really help to really set the stage. There's not this all Bitcoins thing. I'm a big Bitcoin.
I said it was a trap.
Yeah, that's okay. I hear you, and I'm just going to caveat with a little bit of. There's a lot of people that just are transfixed on Bitcoin, and that's fine. They see it as a superior system, and they could be very well right. But you're just going to get this division of people that have money at stake, and they're going to want to be pushing what it is that they have a vested interest in, like anything else. So that's why I think there's a potential fear that this may be something successful that's going to impact them, and it's a good testing ground to see how proof of stake does turn out. So I hope people are doing it with an open mind of could this be better as a whole, and then maybe it starts shifts that there's ways of doing things that are different that maybe Bitcoin will pick up on.
You know, Scott, I think you're basically right? They're angry because they're jealous because the price has been underperforming. You know, in my view, Bitcoin has to work for the whole space to work. Like betting on a decorrelation with ETH mooning and Bitcoin going down is like a very, very low probability event. So, you know, some of this capital that kind of went into ETH anticipating the merge, you could see it in the overheated futures and options market. That's starting to unwind. You know, some of it may flow back into Bitcoin, which has been the laggard, and then everyone can be happy.
I mean, sorry to jump in. ETH BTC is up like 75% since you know, just a few months ago, right? That's a big swing, and Bitcoin's been sort of mired in this rut of whatever the 20K area. I don't think anyone's very happy about at least the Bitcoin price performance, and you know.
Yeah, no one is happy about the entire markets. I think it's like the whole market is hit by macro, and obviously it had some momentum with the transition. And again, I think the reason what I see Bitcoiners and myself included, you know, being angry sort of with the process and not really. So first of all, you know, there's a group of people who are just constantly angry. You can't do anything with them. Like this is the people who are in the space for a while are not really angry in the same way. They follow the process, and you know, one of the big questions like around a lot of people don't believe that proof of stake will lead to more decentralization, and because power will be at the hands of people who have assets and you know, in some seigniorage way, meaning that people who already have a lot of ETH, they'll be able to get more ETH, and you know, you're not able to compete for that. You need to just buy the asset, and so there's a decentralization question that a lot of Bitcoiners are not settled on. And the second is just the whole ethos of sort of like decentralized censorship resistance is linking to energy. It's a physical process that's really hard to beat, and it's designed to beat governments. And proof of stake, in my opinion, and I believe a lot of Bitcoiners think the same way, is not resistant the same way to sort of like government pressure, and that may open up a new can of worms for the space. So it is a new attack vector for the whole space in that respect. A lot of the anger, I think, is like dumb, in my opinion, because it's a really cool technical feat, and there is room for multiple proof mechanisms and multiple systems. And I think Bitcoin and ETH are fundamentally different too. Like one of them is sort of like a smart contract platform. Bitcoin, in my opinion, while it is a smart contract platform, it's more sort of trying to be money and this digital gold stored value type of instrument. ETH is trying to be that a little bit too, but more application layer, like sort of like an app store for other applications to build on. So I think they're different in promise. So I don't get a lot of the anger.
Yeah, I would think that actually, as a Bitcoiner, you would be excited that there was a further differentiation.
Yeah,
True.
I mean.
And
Hey,
so I think it was Matthew really quick that said it. I mean, or maybe it was Jason that talked about the price performance of Ethereum versus Bitcoin, certainly, and how Bitcoin has been mired. I mean, you go back to the Bitcoin halving, and Ethereum has 4x outperformed Bitcoin since Bitcoin's most fundamental bullish event. So I could see why that would trigger some people. Go ahead, Jason.
There's also one thing about Bitcoiners. I'm a Bitcoiner myself too, but there's this view that developers on Ethereum and all the other stuff, they're reckless, right? They don't know what they're doing. They're making changes too quickly. But I think this actually shows that they can do something technically quite amazing, right? There's a lot of testing, there's a lot of thought process in this process, and it worked out well, right? And I think maybe that's something for people to get angry about. But like Gabor said, I think it's pretty silly.
It took 8 years. Right, Anthony? I mean, this is to say that it was reckless. The amount of testing, the amount of, I would say, responsible delays to make sure that it was done right would indicate that that's an unfounded criticism.
Yeah, I would think so. But could there still be issues that emerge? Definitely.
Sure.
When the right time is. But I think that they've always made sure that they try to be ready as much as possible and delay things with good cause.
Yeah. Jason, I see you.
I got to run. Thank you, gents.
Thank you, guys. Jason. And we actually have another one of your guys' favorites. Nimrod and I always have the funniest conversation somehow. But I'm going to bring on Nimrod Lehavi as well. And he's dancing currently in low res. How are you, man? Nice to have you.
Oh, good. Hey, guys.
Hey, Nimrod.
What's up?
So Anthony, I want to touch on something you talked about a little bit earlier, which was all of the fact, obviously, that it's graphics cards and the differentiation between the mining. Well, what the hell happens now to all the Ethereum miners and all of those graphics cards?
I guess people can look for other chains that they can shift over to. They can sell their cards. They could have already been thinking about this for months and years, what to do with it before, and figured out a plan for themselves. But or they're going to start moving over to the proof of work chain and see how that goes, and see if that's going to get some traction there. So I'm not a miner, never have been, but I'm guessing that's the options that they've got.
Anyone else have thoughts on the future of mining here? I mean, it seems like we're already seeing a massive rush of and price drop in these, both new and used.
Yeah, so there is, I think, 200 terahash or so parked already in ETC, and there's some other chains that are picking up some of the hash power. So that's going to be interesting for the security of other chains. With respect to the equipment, I think it kind of screws up the whole 18-month miner cycle. I haven't been mining for a while, but that's going to be impacted, and there's going to be a lot of doing
short NVIDIA? You're calling short NVIDIA?
It's you, Nimrod.
Yeah.
Not financial advice ever here, guys. Yeah,
exactly. So I think to me the interesting thing is where the hash power is going to go. And to Anthony's point, people might try the proof of work chain. I'm curious actually what group that chain is going to attract and how they're going to work with the Ethereum Classic chain and how that's going to play out. Should be interesting. In a few days, we'll know, right? So.
Nimrod, you definitely have thoughts on shorting NVIDIA.
Always. I'm not
Financial
sure if
advice.
it's worth, I'm not sure if it's worth, sharing, but I'm kind of like the past, I don't know, hour or so, I was thinking about it more of as a large scale social experiment. Like, do people actually care about environmental impact? Because if there's no massive price action with the proof of stake ETH now, it means nobody really gives a fuck about. Sorry, nobody gives a hack.
You can say it. It's okay. You can say fuck. Yeah.
Nobody gives a fuck about the whole narrative of Bitcoin is wasting energy. It has a bad carbon footprint. Blah blah blah. If there's no like massive action now, when ETH is proof of stake, I think nobody gives a shit, and we can just drop that narrative and never hear about it again.
What do you guys think?
I mean, we're 5 minutes away from when the ETH PoW folks are supposed to release this code, and the price of ETH PoW, I have to say, it's holding up better than I thought the consensus thought, right? Like it hasn't crashed. There's still a lot of hash power, like 700 on the ETH PoW chain. So like so far, it seems like this is going to be a fair bit of stranded capital.
I haven't looked. What is it currently trading at?
So on Gate, it's like in the 30s.
That's high. Right. I think that futures were implying that it would be about $18.
Sorry,
so that's
44.67 now on Gate. 44.67. Peaked
but
at
why
60.
do we? I mean, beyond the I guess selfishness of miners who don't want to let go. Why do we need this?
We don't, but we don't need ETC as well. Traders will trade. It was proven really well in the previous fork. Traders will
Bitcoin
just
Cash
trade.
as well, right? I mean,
yeah. And Bitcoin Diamond and Bitcoin Gold and whatever other.
Now, whether or not there's enough rewards to incentivize folks to run all this electricity is another story, right? Because haven't the ETH PoW folks allocated themselves all the base fees and all the ETH that the foundation owned as well? So there's a lot of economic power in the miner group, right? Relative.
Economic power, but does that mean that there's going to be a use case or development or any purpose for it moving forward, or is that something they're going to try to back into depending on whether it's worth it based on price?
Yeah, the latter, I think.
So they'll build something if it exists.
That's been the case, right? Like for a lot of other chains, like some they pick up.
Doge.
I think there's going to be, and we've already seen a few notable people with massive followings are going to try to take advantage of what's going on with this, and they're probably taking massive accumulations of the coin, and they're going to be able to use their networks in order to get other people involved with it. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to just be something that will fizzle down the road, and I think there's just going to be a lot of actors who are going to try to take advantage of what's going on here.
Yeah, Nimrod, so your contention is that if the price doesn't go up in the short term, that nobody cares about the carbon footprint. Is that correct?
I think so, because I mean, part of like also what Vitalik just tweeted this morning, like it's 0.02% of the global footprint. It's it's pretty big for like one ecosystem to snap your finger and remove that carbon footprint. And if there's no actual support from the crypto ecosystem, I think it's it's a valid claim that nobody cares about it.
So my guess is there is a lot of ESG and institutional pressure and government pressure on companies. They are knocking on doors and pushing companies to literally move to other proof mechanisms. Just a week ago, the White House put out a note through the EPA and some agencies. They are trying to push, blockchains to more environmentally responsible proof mechanism, which is, again, I completely disagree with that. It's not what America stands for and all that, but that pressure is real. And they are pressuring financial companies as well. And a lot of the financial companies are sort of, play this game. And that's my opinion, is that this is what ETH is, I don't know if it's consciously or not, but that's one of the things that ETH is trying to get ahead of and would probably benefit from, at least like lessens the attack surface on it. So again, in my opinion, there is, energy consumption for proof of work systems that are established like Bitcoin is a feature, not a bug, and it's worth it. but it's just one person saying it. But then there's real government pressure and mounting pressure from the EU, from the US to push on proof of work systems, energy, like the whole macro situation with energy not being abundantly available is also going to play. And in the next 6 months, we'll see this conversation over and over again. I'm actually curious how the ETH Foundation consensus and some of the larger players will manage this discussion, because I feel like there is a good way to handle this. I don't know if they're going to lean into it and say we're environmentally conscious and that's our advantage and play that whole game, or say that this proof mechanism is just better for us, works for our system, and stand up for sort of freedom to do whatever you want. I'm actually curious how it's going to go.
I think it's a fair comparison if you say gold is not environmentally friendly as well. You need to dig it out, you pollute everything, and it's still usable as a hedge asset. But Visa and MasterCard try to be, so maybe like everything on top of ETH has a better status. I'm also interested to see like what will happen in the next equivalent of DeFi summer, now that we can push like massive amounts of transactions without paying a shit ton of money for each transaction. That could be, I think, very interesting, like to see in the next bull cycle.
If Gabor, I know you might have to go. I don't know if it's your time, but I want to make that seamless and comfortable if you do.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. I do need to go, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And be nice to proof of work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, talk about, and as Gabor enters, we've got Pierce Crosby here from TradingView to add as well. But now we've got a lot of people on the screen. This is aggressive. And listen, there's been actually a lot of, to that end, Nimrod, and to what Gabor was saying, there's been a lot of chatter that's now, at least in the eyes of regulators and legislators, not obviously in the eyes of the community, that now Bitcoin will die because it'll basically be regulated away if Ethereum is successful on proof of stake. I think everyone here probably agrees that's nonsense, but I can see the argument that maybe they would come after Bitcoin more heavily than they would have before, based on the sort of ESG argument.
I think it'll be more difficult for them. I mean, if anything, not picking a fight, Anthony, but Bitcoin is still more decentralized. So if they want to shut it down, it'll be much more difficult. So again, I think I think everybody here agrees that it will be practically impossible to regulate off Bitcoin, just because ETH proof of stake.
No, but they could make like higher tax rates on capital gains from proof of work generated profits,
or make it a lot less attractive for institutions, right? By just with harsher regulation. I don't think anyone believes Bitcoin's going anywhere. I just think that the argument there is exactly what Matthew's sort of alluding to. That just make it a lot more difficult and make it more attractive to be in other assets.
But to Nimrod's point, like, let's see if anyone actually cares that this is now more green. And I just think like the bull case is that a very large multinational company or sovereign decides to settle a bunch of value on Ethereum, right? Like even yesterday, there was news on the tape that Russia's going to be trading oil in a handful of cryptocurrencies that are yet unnamed. So will one of these multinationals or sovereigns like look at the new Ethereum proof of stake chain, do several months of due diligence and say like, okay, we're going to pick ETH? Like the probability of that happening has to be higher than it was 2 days ago, but it's going to take some number of months to confirm like whether it happens or not.
And if over-regulating Bitcoin, how would the regulator consider if you trade repped Bitcoin on ETH?
It's nonsense. It's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
but they can make the big institutions, which we can debate whether we want them here or not, but it can make the big institutions just say we're not going to touch it, right? And so the volume goes elsewhere. I don't think that there's any argument that it's going to remain. I mean, Anthony, I would love to hear your response to what Nimrod said about decentralization.
In terms of with comparing Bitcoin.
He said basically, you made the argument, obviously, the move to proof of stake was going to further decentralize Ethereum.
I think that they each have their own challenges of decentralization. So I think that there's potential on one side that people are believing that either way you're going to have these large power entities' ability to take control, and you're going to see already it's kind of centralized in the hands of just a few entities that are controlling so much of stuff between Lido and between the top exchanges. So I don't necessarily believe that that they're scot-free, that this is actually going to be something that's not going to lead to eventual centralization. And I think that, coupled with DAO structures and DAO power, is very troublesome. More and more over the last number of months, I've started to really think about more about how DAOs could potentially be a major problem. When you get people that are joining power to create massive entities that are then incentivized by the monetary gains rather than the ethos of decentralization and other things, which was shown in the votes with Lido to not reduce their size and instead keep growing it. I think it's a big problem. So I don't necessarily agree that this is going to lead to the decentralization that might be thought, and that there could be things over time that weren't thought about, or other things that emerge that are going to enable people with the power to take control of things. So,
I mean, isn't the D in DAO decentralized, right? We're gonna have to start calling them cows.
Well, I've thought this for years. Is that, I mean, DAOs are supposed to be decentralized autonomous organizations, but when you have giving people the ability to vote that don't actually know what they're doing, I like to say it's like telling a plumber to tell what an electrician should be doing. And this is how democracy really works. And it's a flaw of the system, whereby you're just going to get people that are going to vote, I want more money. And they're going to be able to sway these votes, and they don't understand the repercussions and consequences.
That's centralized.
So yeah, that sounds no, it's democratic, but it's not a very good way of doing things, because those people just don't know what they're doing, and they have too much power to make decisions that they don't know any better.
Like let them lose market share
process
organically, right? Just let them lose market share organically. It's not anything to be concerned about, right?
I think you
like,
just
why
described the American
market share
process
troubling. I don't get it.
Sorry, say again, Matthew.
I'm saying that if you think those entities are less efficient because uneducated people are voting, or then just let them lose market share organically. I don't think it's like any type of systemic concern or anything that requires a change in structure. It's like Lido got to where it is because it's a good product. It's not a majority of anything really. If you don't like it, stay somewhere else.
Okay, but let's take a look at what happened with the DAO initially, the very first DAO, and let's look at the power to be able to create change and create forks and do things based on something going wrong with too many people having too much control. The initial DAO was an experiment whereby people were put a ton of money, $100-something million into this project that had a bad contract and failed, and people wanted their money back. And people wanting their money back basically created a battle between consensus and immutability, and consensus won, and people got their money back. So this is the power that DAOs, these large entities, can have to actually create changes that were not thought about. So I don't think you can just say that just let these things go. I think they could be a potential issue down the road that could have massive repercussions with the power and strength that these entities could accumulate, and having the ability to severely impact the system, just like we saw with the DAO and the split, and then Ethereum Classic emerging, and it could have massive repercussions. So yes, I'm not saying don't let them do their thing. I'm saying I think that people aren't still seeing the potential of DAOs being a massive problem down the road with things, and I think that could be something that people should be thinking more about.
I think they're Lord of the Flies, and that they're probably going to go massively wrong, but maybe I'm alone in that. But yeah, I tend to agree with Anthony. That's definitely possible. Pierce, thank you for joining and sitting there quietly while we argue about DAOs. But I want to kind of go a bit back to the merge and generally what you're seeing on TradingView with regard to Ethereum. I think we have a lot of like anecdotal idea that there's been this increasing interest, certainly versus other assets, but you probably have the actual, I don't know, data and insight based on what you're seeing on the platform.
Sure. I mean, across 32 million people around the world, I could probably tell you what asset has the most attention at any given time, probably. In terms of over the past couple of weeks, Ethereum specifically doesn't have any kind of large uptick, I guess, in overall traffic interest. And I think broadly speaking is that, a lot of that has to do with great kind of anticipation, but ultimately, in terms of the actual traffic of attention, I think that really comes from a successful merge, not a pre-merge. And, I see it no different than, Fed minutes. I mean, nobody actually pays attention ahead of Fed minutes until the Fed minutes are out. So, in terms of actually seeing a significant shift in attention, you really actually have to have a successful merge before you have that attention switching from people to, whether they're buying NFTs or altcoins, to actually say, okay, this is actually something that I can really dedicate time to. And that's because, on average, most people are not super, microsecond traders. It'll take a few days for this to really start to, be understood in the ecosystem, is that, wow, we actually do have success. We do have kind of a consensus, and therefore, I can rotate a lot of my attention back to this asset class, versus, right now we're all kind of like sitting on the edge of our seats, just excited for what's potential to come. But in terms of, that actual outcome, I still think that it very much is yet to see the investor class more hyper focused on this. And I think that you'll see that over the next couple of days. I do know the number of Ethereum merge events and parties that are scheduled over the next 48 hours is parabolic, to say the least. So there's definitely, within our crews and like within our kind of I guess social circles, there is a ton of attention. But if we're thinking about this from an actual play, from an investment perspective, it's really not mainstream enough for us to see any like statistically significant increase in attention outside of the micro circles of like the really hardcore crypto people. And I think that you'll actually start to see cascading orders of effect into the more retail asset class over the next couple of days, if this is really the success we were expecting overall.
Right. For investors and traders, shouldn't we really see the impact of the merge over months and even years, with the deflationary aspect and obviously the supply, issuance reduction of up to 90%? Matthew's out of here. Perfect. So, isn't that something that should take a long time to really play out? We keep joking. It's like Y2K, right? You wait for the date to change, the date changes, and you go on with your life.
Yeah, I don't really think that in terms of all the anticipation, it really will build up into, in some ways, unless we see the actual impact on chain, a bit of a nothing burger, in the sense that, Ethereum is, now much more scalable, much more kind of usable for a bunch of different instances. But beyond that, I think it just comes down to the overall interest in the sector itself. Recently, as of this morning, even, I was just looking at, say NASDAQ from a charting perspective versus the major asset classes in crypto. And, the correlation there is still so strong that you really, my hope in reality is that we do have that divergence, right? But it literally is the exact same pattern. And at the end of the day, until we have a divergence there, I think you'll have a lot of the larger macroeconomic environment kind of being a bit of a burden, if you will. Even if Ethereum, has this really large success, it's kind of, we do need to start to see really kind of a decoupling from the NASDAQ and from the larger tech sector before you have that kind of, again, uncorrelated return and really like investor attention overall. So, but that said, I'm very excited in general, because moving this off proof of work in general, it's really interesting to think about what the implications are overall in terms of DAOs. I'm actually very excited about the DAO implications as well, just because the idea that these autonomous vehicles can actually fully control themselves and really build up war chests, if you will, is something I think of as really, really compelling for the space. I don't know. I'm quite a big fan. I'm not actually an owner, but a big fan of like the Nouns projects in the NFT landscape, and they've built up a war chest of close to 40 million based on kind of the sale of these unique assets, which then is going to be actually deployed in very, very interesting ways by the DAO itself. Percentage owners of this larger decentralized organization. And so if this, in some ways makes it much easier for folks to get behind the concept of DAOs in general, I think that there's a lot of implications there in terms of a more commonly structured vehicle for kind of the larger crypto ecosystem in general.
Anyone thoughts on that?
I'm
Yeah,
just
I think
that the network will not get congested because too many people are trading cats. So, that's an upside.
We laugh, but I mean, that really.
Yeah, that was a
Hey.
shit show. Sorry, I was interrupting Anthony in a very Israeli manner. Sorry.
No, I think there's a lot of benefits to DAOs, and I think it's going to take a lot of time to get them sorted out and figured out. It's just, for me, the concerns of what this is going to lead to is something that I've always thought we're not equipped to. And I think Charles told me this one time, Hoskinson, and when I asked him about this concern about what we're creating here, and very clearly coming back with we're definitely not ready for what's being created here. There's just the idea of war chess being developed with autonomous, and they just think about the positives, but think about also the potential risks and problems that are going to come out of these things. And whenever I hear something like that, I think of Skynet, and I think of that's the thing people said about with Ethereum since the very beginning: autonomous agents that are living there that can carry out based on without the engagement of humans to execute contracts and execute things that will execute as expected. There's a lot of great things that are going to come out of it, but there's a lot of very scary things that are going to come out of it as well. So I just want to also make sure that the thought and thinking towards how do we mitigate the problems that are also going to be emerging from these type of systems that are coming out should be not just how great the stuff will be, but also how do we the creators and the technologists and people focus on problems that are going to emerge as well, and make sure that that's also in the back of our mind of the consequences of some of these things that will come out. So that's just a caution, and not to ruin a party here, but I think there's amazing things, the way that how we can bring DAOs to the table that are going to create amazing decision making and opportunities for people to delegate their votes and do things to create better systems. But there's going to be a lot of failure, and there's going to be a lot of consequences over the next few years. And I think the initial DAO was just a sample of that. We saw what happened there, and we saw how DAOs just disintegrated for a number of years after that one experiment. And I'm not sure if people know this, but there was a lot of debate with the initial team about turning Ethereum into a DAO right off the bat. There were parties that were clashing here of let's be a DAO right off the bat, and then others thinking, wait a second here, we're trying to develop smart contracts, and that would have been like telling Satoshi to do smart contracts on Bitcoin right off the bat. Let's do that. And thankfully, in my opinion, we didn't go in that direction because we didn't want to be. We needed to make sure that we were focusing on what our mission was, the smart contract platform, and not creating these new types of governance systems where everybody's their own leader and it would not have worked, I don't think, at that time. But there was a lot of people that wanted that to happen right off the bat, and I don't think it was ready for that. And I'm still not sure that we're ready to see what DAOs are going to be bringing to the table. And I think there will be a lot of carnage that's going to be associated with it along the way, and step backs that will have to happen when big problems do emerge. And I think that DAO was a very good signal of what it was back in 2015, 2016. So just there's a lot of great things, but also the cautionary tale of what are some of the consequences that people may not have thought about.
Maybe it's just a symptom of the bear market, but it feels like to me the shine has, everything, but has worn off the DAO concept in general. I don't even hear people talking about them. What if DAOs just kind of don't happen?
No, it's the same with NFTs. It's the same with everything else. It's get that hype cycle, right? And then it's got to figure itself out with the value that actually comes forward over the years. And hopefully in a slow, steady process that's not going to have too much problems associated with it.
Pierce, you've had some amazing facial expressions in the last 5 minutes. So I know you have thoughts.
I don't know. In terms of just thinking about, maybe some of the pessimism around DAOs in general. I think in terms of, what the initial wave of DAOs in terms of like my involvement with projects maybe in 2018 or maybe even a little earlier, I think there was this initial understanding that this was going to replace some kind of modern governance structure or something like that. I think in general, like that concept is maybe a bit kind of misguided. I think that, what the internet is trying to build is not a replacement to the current system. It's trying to build a better system in general. And so
Sorry,
I think
who are you talking about? Who's trying to build that? You're saying the internet is building it? Sorry, I didn't understand what who you're saying is building it.
in terms of, okay, so in terms of who's actually responsible for building the structure of DAOs?
No, just in general. I think you said the internet is trying to be built into. I didn't understand who you're saying is building that thing that you're talking about. Maybe I just. I thought you said the internet is being built by, and I didn't understand who you meant.
Okay, so I mean, I'm not using specific projects. Just, I mean, in general. So I mean, of course, TradingView is very uniquely positioned in a sense that we don't try to talk about individual projects in the degree that maybe, you know, one could be very, very specific in some ways and others can't. So broadly speaking, when I say the internet, I'm referring to what you could consider to be, you know, the actual like darker or deeper web rather than just like a specific chain or specific project. So in aggregate, I think if you think back to what the purpose of DAOs really are initially, I think that everybody has a take on what a DAO could be in specific relation to their chain per se. But I think overall, like the initial anticipation of what DAOs were supposed to be, at least from the first version, was to be some kind of replacement for an actual structure for a company or a structure for some kind of organization, like say a Uniswap or something like that. I think like modern takes on DAOs are really just a great way to collaborate with fellow like-minded people. Whether or not you use one specific chain over another, I really think is at the discretion of the user. Whether or not they love one given chain versus another. But broadly speaking, like I said, I mean the point of these is not to replace existing systems. I think it's very, very kind of misguided to want to basically have a replacement for existing systems and saying that, oh, well, DAOs was supposed to be the solution to that. When the reality is like, I don't think they ever were going to be a solution for that. And so when people say that it's a bit of a failure, I question what the framework of what you initially thought, DAOs could be or the first place. Like, I don't think anybody actually anticipated that my cap table would ever be, a DAO. And so, I mean, it's aspirational for sure, but like the realistic aspects is that it's just never going to be that, especially when it comes down to governments and ultimately who's going to take control of a company if you're doing something illegal. It's not going to be an autonomous vehicle. It just simply can't. Especially when you look at giant charts like the one that was shared around 2 weeks ago, where Amazon is essentially running half the servers that are more or less responsible for all the nodes on the network. So like, this idea that, oh, we're going to have a completely decentralized autonomous organization, there's so much systemic risk in that it's just, the premise is basically broken from the get-go. So, but that's all to say that, like I said, within that lens of this is not a replacement for an existing system, I still do think that there's a ton of value in creating these autonomous organizations. And really pseudo-autonomous is what I'm trying to get at, because the reality is there will always be some kind of systemic risk to these type of projects in general. But I mean, like I'm involved in a project most recently, which is like an NFT project, but more than anything, it's actually just a great way for people to come together in like a collective agreement. Like, hey, this is a hilarious project. I mean, basically, the premise is a meme in itself, right? And so, but this is a great way for me to collaborate with actually 69 of my friends in kind of like an autonomous fashion. We all have to vote to actually determine what we do with the treasury that we're building. But at the end of the day, like, this is a very simple way for us to have fun together. And, I'm not trying to replace a cap table or anything like that. I'm just like building fun projects on the internet. Like, people that get like super like, kind of like disgruntled about how, I can't replace my cap tables and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I never wanted to. I just wanted to have something to like actually collaborate with my friends on the web in general. So I think that's kind of like what I'm really excited about, is kind of this very new experiment, not like trying to replace existing experiments. And I think in general, people that are, coming to Ethereum to replace existing projects, I mean, I think that thesis kind of was played out, right? Like, we saw this idea that, every government will have something on their balance sheet or take these more seriously. I just don't think that we're seeing that. Like, in reality, that was like the thesis of 2020, right? Like, it never occurred. And so, like, maybe one or
I-
two,
yeah.
you know, like
I talk about
Good
that all the
project.
time. I mean, if you go back to, August of 2020, Saylor buys Bitcoin, obviously puts it on the balance sheet. Tesla follows up. You see Square and then nothing, right? And we thought that we were going to see billions and billions of dollars from sovereign wealth and from sovereign nations and from corporations pouring in. And what did they do? They all gave Andreessen Horowitz a few $1 billion to invest in Web3.
But maybe
That's
it's
what
just
happened.
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean. That, go ahead,
maybe,
Nimrod.
maybe just a step on the way, just like
Exactly.
crypto Bitcoin and Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies are just a step on the way to change the financial system. I would like
agree.
to challenge that. I think that DAOs are a step in the way of creating more decentralized. And I would love, I hope none of my previous investors hear me. I had a horrible time with investors. I would have loved a DAO instead of the board fights. I would, for 100%. And I think that to a certain extent, at least many of the projects that are considering DAOs for certain activities are absolutely looking to replace existing systems. Just like Bitcoin was initially created. And I think that most of the initial crowd that, was kind of sucked into the Bitcoin rabbit hole was so lured because it's once in a lifetime event where you can join a completely parallel potential financial system which isn't so fucked up to the bone in every step of the way. So I would love, I'm happy to accept our new overlords with DAOs.
Yeah, I think that it's just because we haven't seen stuff yet. It's never going to happen.
Sure.
I do think it's going to happen in the future, and I do believe that Ethereum and technology similar will change systems. And I think that you can consider Ethereum to be a DAO. And I think that it's just stepping stones. These are things that just because they haven't done this yet, or it didn't happen the way that we thought would happen with people getting into Bitcoin and putting it on their balance sheet, it doesn't mean it's not going to be happening a few years from now, and there'll be a better way to sort it out and it'll progress. So I do think that it will be massive change in systems over the years. It's just a matter of the when.
Yep.
Here's what you described with Amazon Web Services, basically everything being based on it. I mean, that's also one of the arguments a lot of people make against proof of stake.
Well,
right? No matter how decentralized you get, you still can be shut down by a centralized authority if the internet goes
there is
down.
no cloud, right? I mean, there's no cloud. It's just somebody else's computer. As long as
this is the change that needs to happen, and it's what I'm personally working on right now. Is that all of my infrastructure for Jax. For those that don't know, I run Jax Liberty. My company Decentral makes that product, and we're in 120 countries, and we support many different chains. And all of our infrastructure is on AWS right now.
Yeah.
And we're changing that. And I've over the last 10 years, we've been building our infrastructure and building things to eventually get it in the hands of individuals. Because I have this theory that you just can't have a user-controlled internet, which is what Web3 is promised to be, without the actual person being their own server. And in order to do that, there needs to be easy to run hardware devices that anybody can plug and play to be their own node and their own server, to send their own transactions, to not have to limit transactions based on government saying you can't send to that address like we've seen recently. So I think the shift is going to be coming, and this is what I'm helping to spearhead with a new product that I'm launching this year, which is how do we turn everybody into their own personal server, their own personal blockchain computer, their own personal server that they can plug and play and connect directly to the protocols of whatever they want and send their own transactions and get all the blockchain data they need. And this is what I've been building for 10 years is how do we empower people with the tools they need to be in control of their digital life, their money, communication, and identity. Jax is a non-custodial wallet. The keys are held by the individual, not by us. But we're still a weak point that if our servers go down, our users can't send transactions. So how do we further remove the centralization that is happening now, where we're seeing AWS having 90% of all Ethereum transactions, or we're seeing larger blockchain cloud services providers that if they go down or something happens with them, or they get regulated to the point that they can't be, it's no longer decentralized, Ethereum's finished. So how do we further decentralize the infrastructure? And that's what I think needs to happen, so that these large powerhouses are not accumulating like the Web2 models have been and putting in the hands of individuals. And that's something that's sparked my continued kind of motivation in this space, is that this is what I've done and I'm building, and that's our mission, is to and I've got the computers right here at first glance, but we're building nodes that people can run in their homes very simply, like a PlayStation 5, and have everything they need to be independent, so that if government knocks on my door tomorrow and says, you can't send these transactions to it, you're going to take your servers down off of AWS. It's like, our nodes are being run by our users, not us. And that's what we got to keep moving towards, is the individual being empowered and not reliant on these centralized trust entities or institutions that are right now in control of about 90 to 90-something% of all Ethereum infrastructure is in the hands of very few centralized trusted entities that could be persuaded or have different motivations than what people on Ethereum really want. And it's easy for developers to build on these systems, but that's kind of having a counter impact where the nodes are being diminished, and we need to increase nodes and increase the decentralization of node infrastructures, and that hasn't been happening.
Now we've got like 2 minutes left, so we're going to do a quick fire round. Everyone's thoughts on what happens with Ethereum, not fundamentally, but I guess more just interest. Do you think that now that the merge has been successful, Pierce, like you were saying, you know, we need to wait for it to actually happen. Do you think that we're going to see sort of a mad rush for interest over the next few months in Ethereum versus everything else? And then we'll close up.
So in terms of next couple of months, I would say the next couple of months have very little to do with Ethereum, but much more to do with the macro environment around Ethereum. And it's very unfortunate, but it's, you know, the fact, and it's so crazy, but it literally is the fact that, you know, some centralized organization, which is literally the Federal Reserve, has such an impact on such obscure things, such as, you know, something like a new centralized layer one blockchain. I think that in terms of over the next year, there's a ton of upside, I think, and attention. But unfortunately, in terms of like a near term, it really is kind of mired in much larger problems. So overall, within our world, a rotation of interest makes a ton of sense. But from kind of the larger environment, you know, a rotation in retail interest, you know, this type of kind of you know, migration is still something that I think is caught up in the larger kind of scheme of kind of how the world is moving right now. So I'm super bullish on the medium term. Short term, there's just so much, you know, chaos that's kind of taking up the home screen, if you will. And that's kind of like the big issue, I think, overall is, you know, like kind of a, you know, stay tuned. I'm very excited to see, you know, what actually comes of the merge itself. But, you know, there's so many bigger issues that are kind of taking up bandwidth for retail investors, which is what I know, that, you know, they're just really not focused on kind of the incremental value add of, you know, a type of blockchain versus another type of blockchain.
Guys, I got to
Nimrod. Okay, Anthony, you can go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
But thank you so much, guys. Nimrod, my friend, good to see you. Scott, you as well. Pierce, nice to meet you. Take care, guys.
Awesome. Thanks. Nimrod, your final thoughts. Thank you, Anthony.
I think it's pretty much what Pierce said. I mean, everybody's super tied up to the macro environment. I mean, nobody's really, except from us crypto geeks, nobody gives a shit. It's probably going to materialize.
Just like the halving. Same with the halving.
Exactly like the halving. Exactly. Nobody gives a shit. We'll probably see like some of the fruits of that in the next bull cycle, just because it will be more scalable and we can see more crazy shit going on top of Ethereum. Maybe we'll see some downside with the other, you know, layer ones like Solana, because they were kind of gaining traction because of supposedly better performance. But that's it. I mean, that's it.
Awesome, guys. I thank you all for. We had a lot of people. That was kind of we managed to not make it chaotic, much like the merge, right? It went off without a hitch. But really always awesome to have both of you guys. Everybody who's following along, we tagged everybody's Twitters below the video. It's too much to go through all of it. I agree with everything that you guys said, basically, right? I mean, I think that you know, it's Pierce who sort of said there's going to be a whole bunch of merge parties, and I have a vision of people playing Dungeons and Dragons in their mom's basements from the 80s and screaming about why proof of work is better. I don't know. Maybe that's the kind of party that we get, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're finally evolving. Everyone, I will be back tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, of course. And that's all I got for you today. Nimrod, thank you. Pierce, thank you, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Always.
See you all tomorrow. Peace.
That's dope.